We're going to begin our next discussion. It's going to be a Blink talk with Erik Engervall from Spotify. And please help me give him a warm welcome and welcome, Erik.
All right. Let's see if this works. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I've actually been at Spotify for a whole 2 weeks now, so joining actually, I'm moved from here, so you could say I was the end consumer for the stuff that Leslie and the platform team was working with. God damn, this is impractical. Oh, there we go. And yeah, it was an amazing, roughly 2.5 years that I was in the consumer app, working very closely with, obviously, all the teams involved, among others, the platform team. So I've been seeing the profits and the pains of the monorepo. But that's not exactly what we're going to talk about today. So it's a Blink talk or Lightning talk, so I'll be fairly short. I'm going to talk briefly about multi-module projects. Does anyone know what that is? You can call them monorepos. So this is a quote found on the interwebs. Does anyone recognize this? It's from a small library. So how would one go about creating a multi-module project? We've already talked about some of the pros and cons, pains and profits, so I'm not going to delve into that. Instead, I'm going to focus on some more practical aspects on how one could achieve this for your own project. And this will not necessarily be only applicable for in-house projects, but rather, say, open source. So say that you have your somewhat classic project structure for a calculator application. In which that you have the, well, this is obviously extremely dumbed down, but you have a calculator repo. It contains one source with index.js, and then you have another repo, which is called add, which, well, it does addition. So in theory, this could be 2 different teams working on these different features, but in the end, the calculator will at some point pull in the add, and yeah, you'll have to maintain these 2 different libraries. There might be different coding styles and yada yada. So how would one go about putting this into the same sort of structure? So you could introduce a monorepo in which you have packages and you have the calculator and add. At this point, you have everything in a shared place. You have the same ESLint rules. You have hopefully the same test, or at least the test framework will be the same. You ensure that you have some basic sanity in terms of versioning, because you would put all your dev dependencies at the very root. And it gives a sort of shared sense of, say, standards. Cohesion was the word, no? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You see? I learn. So how do you manage this? Well, you could do bash. Does anyone know the difference of these 3? Or what they do, even? Yeah, people don't know bash, and that's typically why we don't go for the bash approach. So if we can keep it JavaScript, if we can stick with this this ecosystem, that would be preferable, no? So what can we do? Well, we could use another package to manage our modules or packages. So a package for packages. If you were fast enough on the Babel or Babel slide, I'm not sure, Swedifying it to Babel, you saw that they mentioned lerna as well. So lerna is a tool for managing, say, a monorepo with a bunch of different modules within it. Its configuration is very straightforward. I think this is like the minimal configuration that you can do. Is just a JSON file in which you specify which packages will be within the scope, so to say. And this is the example of how you could configure your root package.json and some Here's some practical commands. So this gives you power to execute yarn or npm commands, if you will, throughout your packages. So if you remember, we had the calculator and the add packages. So the first command will run build for the packages that has a build script in them. So already there we have some smart filtering that you don't have to care about. So you only need to declare the stuff that you want to be present in each individual package, and Lerna will figure it out. For exec, for example, that will run it for all the packages. So if you have something that is an install script or whatever, it will just propagate through the entire thing. There's another like a billion things that you can do. Feel free to Google it. Okay, so I burned through this pretty quickly. So this is a bonus. So I'm building a project on the side, and there's only really one thing that I'm deploying, which is in source. And previously, I had a hard time testing this because the library itself is an integration testing library. So I would need like a full application which would pull in the library and utilize it in order to run the integration tests. So I would have something on the side locally. It wouldn't necessarily be a repo. It would just be a bunch of local code, and it wasn't super maintainable because I would have to either download it from npm or pull it in locally, which was kind of crap. So instead, I refactored it to this monorepo style. I'm only distributing the one thing, Dockest, but I have a bunch of examples that I can run through, which will either download it if I want to, or I can just symlink it with a yarn link and just run through all of them pointing towards Dockest, and it will run towards like the actual code as it stands right now, which is super practical. Yeah, that's the sharings that I had today.